Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show right here over the digital airways of YouTube and, of course, iHeartRadio. The biggest game of college football this season is going down tomorrow night when Georgia heads to Alabama. And I couldn't think of anybody better to break this game down than my buddy, my good friend, my colleague, the mouth of the South, one of the elite football minds in America. We won't get on the fact that he tried to get at me a couple of weeks ago, okay? Because we're still buddies. The one and only Paul Finebaum. What's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, Stephen A., I mean, I don't know where I go for penance. I've caught more flack over daring to disagree with you on First Take. I don't know what. I'll spend the rest of my life offering confession.
I don't think that was the reason, Paul. I don't think it was that you disagreed with me. It's that you associated the word subservient to me when it came to talking about primetime Deion Sanders. I think that's what the problem was, Paul.
Well, I was trying to ignore that fact that I used that word, but I will still apologize. I respect you way too much. It was just one of those moments. You're on First Take. You're a little bit uptight. You're with the man, and you.
I got it. I got it. By the way, it was nice hanging in your studio last week sometime. Really, really nice studio setup you got there. It's pretty nice. Let's get to this game, Paul, because I've been waiting for this. I understand Nick Saban isn't there any longer, but this is probably the biggest game of the year so far as I'm concerned. Alabama versus Georgia. How big of a game is this for new coach Kalen DeBoer in your mind?
DeBoer, Stephen, as you well know, has probably done as good a job as I've ever seen in a transition. He lost 2 or 3 players first week, and since then he has just been throwing down darts like I haven't seen. And I think he's in good shape. And quite frankly, I think he's going to win this game because he's got Jalen Milroe, and I know that's another story in itself. Right. Jalen Milroe dared to disrespect you. And by the way, I was on the show that day. We'll get to that in a minute. But Kirby Smart's got the pressure on him. I think that's where all this pressure is because he just has been unable to beat Nick Saban in Alabama.
Why has he been unable to beat Nick Saban in Alabama, considering how great they were, particularly since 2020? Outside of 3 losses to Alabama, including two in an SEC title game, I think one for national championship, of course. Outside of that, we're talking about a university that's been 56-1 versus everybody else. What has been the issue with Kirby Smart going up against Nick Saban in the past?
Stephen A., I think there's just a little bit of tension for him. He's not relaxed. I mean, Kirby's never relaxed, but Saban just gets in his head. I've had Lane Kiffin tell me that he has blown the game against Alabama every time because he just lets Nick get into his head. You've seen it with the great ones. You're friends with Michael. He did it to almost everybody he ever played. Tiger Woods did it. And I think Nick Saban did that to Kirby Smart. Even though Kirby Smart beat him that one time in the national championship game, the loss last year may have been among the most costly I've ever seen. Now Kirby did lose to Saban on a walk-off to Devontae Smith in the national championship game. But last year, everything was on the line. He had a chance to do something nobody had ever done, a three-peat, and he just coached a little bit uptight, and Saban beat him. And after that game, one of Saban's top assistants told me privately that he thought Nick Saban was going to retire because he had stopped Kirby Smart from supplanting Saban really as the best coach in the land.
I guess what I'm thinking about when I think about Kalen DeBoer being the new head coach, this man has won 90% of his games at 4 different institutions where he coached, including a couple of national championships in NAIA competition, 2-time Pac-12 Coach of the Year, national championship game last year with Penix as his quarterback before losing to Michigan. This man has been highly successful or whatever. When you look at him, particularly in comparison to Nick Saban, knowing football, knowing the SEC the way that you do, how do you feel about Kalen DeBoer as a coach? The success of the Saban?
The only thing that has concerned me is his ability to deal with the culture. He's done brilliant work. In fact, at Washington, he's 5-1 as an underdog against top 10 opposition. He beat Oregon a couple of times. He's beat Texas. I mean, he has really been masterful in the big game. The only game he lost was the Michigan game, and that really wasn't even a fair fight last year for the national championship. You probably were too busy hanging out with all the billionaires in the box to even notice the final score. We all saw you up there. But that's okay. But that's who he is. And the only problem I have, and it's not even a problem, is what happens if things go haywire. I've lived in that state a long time. I'm not there anymore, but I spent 30 years in Alabama, and there's nothing quite like an Alabama team losing on the next Monday. The place literally is in mourning, and the pressure starts to build. He hasn't had to deal with that yet.
We look at Ohio State and Michigan, and we say, if you're Ohio State and you're Ryan Day, you got to beat Michigan. Where before Harbaugh started beating them over the last 3 years before he walked back to the NFL, we like, you got to beat Ohio State. Is that the situation between Georgia and Alabama, specifically when it comes to Kirby Smart and Georgia at this particular juncture in his career?
Yeah, that's the biggest rivalry right now in the SEC. These two have played for the national championship, not playoffs, not SEC. They played for the national title twice since 2017. That's two teams from the same league. And Kirby has mastered the game, but he's not been able to master this. And the only thing I'll offer that in this particular year, it won't matter as much. Smart has not lost a regular season game since Florida in October of 2020. That was the COVID year.
Wow.
I mean, that's unbelievable, Stephen. He's lost those two SEC championship games, and that those have hurt. But he's been masterful. But if he loses this game, it's not done. But he's in trouble because he still has to go to Texas on October 19th. He still has to go play Lane Kiffin in Oxford. Those are no easy games.
When we think about Carson Beck, I've seen the kid play. He can ball, make no mistake about it. I like what I see from him. How good is he? What are his prospects looking like, considering the next level and what his capability is at Georgia?
A month ago, I had people telling me he was going to be the number one pick in the draft. I haven't heard anybody say that in a while because he just has not looked good this year. He looked very tentative. He has one of his top offensive linemen hurt, but everybody goes through that. So he's been a little bit shaky. He hasn't been terrible, but in the Kentucky game, he was off. And by the way, everybody talks about, well, that defense really only held Kentucky to 12 points. If Mark Stoops, the Kentucky coach, had gone for it with 2 minutes to go on 4th and 8, there's a good chance Kentucky would have won that game, and this conversation would be upside down right now. But Beck has to get better. He doesn't have Brock Bowers as his tight end anymore. That guy was generational. Stephen, they're one of the best tight ends we've ever seen in college football. He misses him. He's got some great running backs, including ETN over from Florida from last year. His brother obviously plays in the NFL, but they've got to get in rhythm, and they have been so slow to start games. I mean, they were only up by Clemson in the first half, I think 6-0. They did the same thing against Kentucky. If they start like that Saturday night, they're going to lose this game.
Alabama's averaging 49 a game this season thus far, but their stiffest competition was against the likes of Wisconsin, and we saw how that ended up. What are we to make of what we've seen from their offense thus far under Kalen DeBoer?
They've been great. Not only that, Alabama has a couple of new weapons, especially at running back. Haynes, a freshman. They don't quite have the wide receivers that they have had in the past. But Jalen Milroe is such an elusive player. He's not the most accurate passer, but he throws one of the best long bombs of any quarterback I've seen in college football right now. He just sometimes makes poor decisions under pressure.
You know, it's interesting you bring him up. He showed up on First Take. I was on vacation. You were there with him. And he's sitting up there doing social media hits where, Stephen A., I'm looking for you. You called me out. And I'm going like this. I like the brother. He can play. He's not a scrub. He's an incredible athlete. I give credit where credit is due. But Bryce Young spoiled me watching him at Alabama. And you're succeeding this brother, and I'm watching you throw with inaccuracy on many occasions last year. How dare he have his back up over such a thing that I may have said at that particular moment in time, even though I know I give him credit later on in the season. What did you feel about Jalen Milroe before compared to how you feel about him now, Paul Finebaum?
I want to address that because I was on the show that day and I was interviewing him, and I later found out, Stephen, I'm not trying to out anybody, but I'm going to. You know who was the instigator that day?
Who?
It was Jay Williams. Jay Williams was hanging around with Milroe. He's doing some work for him, and I have impeccable sources that Jay Williams put him up to dissing you. So I don't.
Wow.
I'm not trying to cover for my good buddy Jalen Milroe. But if you got a beef with somebody, you ought to take it up with Jay, not Milroe.
How about that? But how do you feel about him? How do you feel about Milroe compared to what you thought about him last year?
I like him a lot, but and here it comes. He makes me uncomfortable sometimes because of his decision making. And you were right, what you said. He's put Alabama in some very awkward positions because of that. He's gotten away with it most of the time. Now, you saw in the Michigan game, he made some big mistakes, especially now. I'm not going to blame him for that final play. That was a boneheaded call from the former offensive coordinator to think you could just run the ball up the middle on a brick wall defense like Michigan. But ultimately, he can lose a game for you, and that's what Kirby Smart is thinking about right now in relation to Saturday night.
Let me transition to one of the biggest stories going on in college football this week. We talked about it earlier in the week in our day job on First Take, my day job on First Take. We're definitely going to talk about it now. At UNLV, Las Vegas, quarterback Matthew Sluka left the undefeated Rebels on Tuesday over claims of an unpaid verbal NIL promise of $100,000 from a UNLV assistant coach. The quarterback's father, Bob Sluka, told ESPN that head coach Barry Odom later said in a phone conversation the offer wasn't valid because it didn't come from him. UNLV had this to say in a statement, quote, football player Matthew Sluka's representative made financial demands upon the university and its NIL collective in order to continue playing. UNLV Athletics interpreted these demands as a violation of NCAA pay-for-play rules as well as Nevada state law. UNLV does not engage in such activity, nor does it respond to implied threats. UNLV has honored all previously agreed upon scholarships for Matthew Sluka, end quote. Paul, take it from there. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's why people hate lawyers, because we know that was written by an attorney. It was really a disgraceful comment. I mean, they offered him the money. They got him to leave Holy Cross to go out there, and he's a really good quarterback, Stephen A. And this is over $100,000. Now, in everyday life, $100,000 is a lot of bread. But in college football right now, it is not. They're second string defensive tackles making more than that in the Big Ten and the SEC. And you think about all they had to do. Let's say they coughed up to $100,000. You talk about that versus the publicity that they're getting. I mean, they were a featured story today on First Take. They're here on your show. That equals billions of dollars of bad pub. Because why would any player in their right mind go play for Barry Odom at UNLV right now?
That's exactly how I feel. I think they were absolutely silly to take this public the way that they did and to conduct themselves the way that they did. And why would you want to go play for the program? If I'm a player, I wouldn't think about playing for the program. Last question here. Alabama, Georgia, who you got? What score?
I like Alabama. I can't lay the game out for you. I think Georgia will start off slow. I think Alabama could be very explosive. I see them getting a reasonably good lead. I think Georgia might come back. But that -2 that Georgia's favored by, I know a lot of my friends in Alabama are jumping all over that, and I don't blame them.
I don't know if you noticed, my man Deion Sanders, prime time, Colorado. I mean, 3-1 on the year. 3-1 on the year. I mean, they're going against UCF. I know they're going to have some problems. I mean, it's going to be a big deal, but I'm just wondering, Paul, how you feeling about that right now? How you feeling about the job that prime time is doing right now, Paul Finebaum?
Yeah, I may be begging you to, with my hat in my hand in a couple of weeks, saying, Stephen A., can you get me an audience with Pope Dion, because I need to get down on my knees and say I'm sorry.
Right. Okay. I'm going to hold you to it. Paul Finebaum, appreciate you, buddy. As always, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Stephen A. Pleasure.
All right. One and only Paul Finebaum right here on the Stephen A. Smith Show over the digital airways of YouTube and, of course, iHeartRadio.